Welcome to the long-awaited, much-anticipated 4-boxing video that I didn't really want to make because this is where hands get thrown. There's so many different 4-boxing combinations, so many different choices, so no matter what I say, I'm pretty much going to be wrong to somebody. However, since it's my video, I'm going to tell you what I would do if I was 4-boxing. Now, when we get to the point of 4-boxing, there's two main decisions we have to make. One is, the most characters I'm going to box is 4.
And you suck ass at all the games you try to play.
So I'm going to stay with a 4-box. I'm not going to do any type of like raids. I'm not going to build a core group. I'm just going to do my own thing. Group, experience, some bosses, maybe some older content. 4-box is as much as I'm doing. And then there's people like me who where 4-box is just the start.
I like it a lot.
And that's where we're going to start this video. If you are 4-boxing, building a 4-box with the intent or the possibility to grow that 4-box into a full group or 2 groups. And to do that, we need a core. So my number 1 preferred order is for core, the core group as we'll call it. And that is going to be a tank, bard, cleric, and a slower. And the recommended order I'm going to have is warrior, cleric, bard, shaman. That to me is the most elite group that you can make for the core. You have good raid tank capabilities, you have the best healer, you got bard for resist and travel speed, which if you're on a TLP early on, those resists are huge, and you have shaman for buffs, pretty much the best slower. So my number 1 top order is going to be warrior, cleric, bard, shaman. However, you can still get by depending on what you want to do with changing the tank out. So the number 2 that people are going to find, it's kind of like a midway point between the warrior and the paladin, and that is the SK, cleric, bard, shaman. I've always found that SKs make pretty decent raid tanks, and they make really good group tanks. Not quite the best tanks when it comes to raids because obviously they're missing disciplines like defensive, but they are far superior, I think, than paladins for raid tanking. At some point you'll get glyphs and stuff that will kind of turn you into a little mini warrior. You can use AA to buy these glyphs, but I main a paladin, and to me it's always been warrior, SK, paladin. Now the reason I main a paladin is because it to me is the best group, the best survivability, and the best utility tank, meaning that it can do all sorts of things from lay of hands with the heal over time effect on lay of hands when you get the AA. So I can pretty much save anybody, save myself, heal my group, and if someone is taking damage, instead of relying on taunt or trying to get aggro, I can actually just divine stun them, which will buy me a brief second to get a heal off before the caster to heal themselves, so I can actually stun mobs to save the group or save a wipe. And I have resurrection, so if my cleric does die, it does not interfere with my grouping as long as the rest of the group survives, which we usually do because you have things like lay of hands. And like I said, the AA lay of hands does basically a complete heal every 6 seconds for 30 or 36 seconds. So if you can end the fight within that time frame, you're going to be good to go. That's why I play a paladin, but on here it is the 3rd recommended order. It really depends on what you want to do. We can also have alternatives to the core, and the way I built this is for caster DPS. If you think of a shaman, they have really good melee buffs, attack buffs, etc. Not so much for casters. So what I've done for the alternates for the core is I've just added an enchanter. I have paladin, cleric, bard, enchanter. That's my personal preference because obviously without the shaman, that kind of takes away from a little bit of the raid tanks. The enchanter still does slow, but now we're looking at paladin and a group. So you could have caster DPS in here with both the bard and the enchanter, so you got maximum buffs and mana regen, and the paladin just like goes really well with its group heals and such for that type of group. And then I've ranked the warrior next, and the SK last on this chart, which I mean between the warrior SK maybe it's a toss-up, but like I said, this is my preferred order. And with the enchanter, you can throw, like I said, you can use the enchanter charm pet, which is a lot of DPS, so you still could throw 2 melee in these groups, but for the 5th and 6th characters down the road, you can put any type of casters in there, and that's literally any caster you want. And you'll have pretty good mana regen, which is a plus for casters. What we're looking at now is number 2, the semi-core, which is still kind of a core build, but mainly for people that are only going to 4-box. And they're not going to be doing types of raids, and if they do, they're going to become part of a raid, so someone else is going to provide the things that they're missing. So for the semi-core, it's basically tank, slower, and then 2 times DPS. My recommendations, SK Shaman obviously is the best duo, and then Monk. SK Shaman, Zerker, but really any 2 melee works. If you get a rogue, you might have problems get behind for backstab, unless you're using some other type of software to help you out with that. So it could be literally SK Shaman, Ranger, Monk, whatever you want to put there. But as I said before, the Shaman, it really helps those melee classes, so SK Shaman is still perfect for the semi-core group. And then alternatives, you can literally have any tank in there. So if you wanted to have, a Paladin instead, Paladin, Shaman, a Cleric, and a melee, or SK Beast Lord, Cleric, and literally any DPS, because the Beast Lord and the Enchanter both have mana regen. The Beast Lord's kind of like a hybrid where it has mana regen but also some Shaman buffs. So when you get to a tank, Beast Lord, Cleric, you can put any DPS, caster, or melee. And then when you get to the last option, tank, Enchanter, Cleric, you could put any DPS in again. However, you don't have the Shaman for melee buffs, so tank, Enchanter, Cleric, and a mage or something like that would probably be better for that. You can use any type of tank you want for these groups. It's really whatever comes down to what you prefer to play. Since you're only going to be playing 4, it's better that you play the 4 that you want to play. On the number 3, so with number 2, you got the semi-core, and you're only going to be 4-boxing, but you do leave the possibility of expansion, because even if you go SK Shaman 2 melee, you can always add, a Cleric Bard to that mix later, and then you got your full group. As I've said before, early on in Classic, like the best type of group is literally SK Shaman, Cleric, Bard, Monk, because monks are such high DPS at the start. Those can be replaced later on by Berserkers and other classes. But when you get to number 3, now we're only 4-boxing. And we're not 4-boxing in a way to do hardly anything that's hard. Maybe some cool, neat tricks or some gimmicks. This is where you're really just going to have a lot of fun. And I got some recommendations, but if you're 4-boxing and you don't like any other core combinations or semi-core combinations, then you're pretty much looking at some of the pet classes. Mage, Beast Lord, Cleric, Mage, Beast Lord, Neko Cleric, get all 3 pet classes there. And this could be literally anything with a healer. Alternate ideas, Ranger, Shaman, anything. So Rangers have chain, they also have taunt. They're not the best tanks, but even in the Omens of War era, I've used a Ranger to main tank as I was running around Wall of Slaughter, getting some AA and killing named and farming stuff. So you can do Ranger, Shaman, and get away with it. You can add anything to that group. And I've also done that with a Berserker. Berserker does not have taunt, so you're really relying on DPS or having a really geared Shaman that can actually tank and hold aggro in case that the Berserker loses it. And you can add any 2 classes you want to that. And then third, the Monk is kind of like a mitigation-based leather champion, so they do pretty good mitigating damage, so they could be used as a tank. But again, in that scenario, no taunt, so you're relying on Monk damage and weapon procs to hold aggro.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
So if your Shaman has good gear, then you can tank some of the damage too. It's very good at holding aggro to Shaman. Some people actually tank with their Shamans in their groups because they're so good at keeping themselves alive and holding aggro. You can also add any 2 classes to that. With this one, we can go into all the benefits, but if you watched all my 2 and 3 boxing videos, you understand the benefits of each type of setup and class. And this is my preferred order. Now the interesting thing here is that there's so many different variations for 4-box combos that I actually would like to hear what you're doing for a 4-box combo or what type of recommendations or setup you're using. And not only that, some people will leave I'm playing Ranger, whatever. It'd be really helpful if you told me what you use them for, what a regular pull looks like, whether they're following you around or you set up camp or how you're pulling. That type of stuff would not only be helpful for me, but for other people reading this. So go ahead and leave that in the comments. And once again, thanks for watching.